Hi Fude lovers, welcome back. Today's video will encompass an overview of the brands Shou Shou and Qinzhi, the quality, hair details and types, specifically the differences in Chinese saibikoho, comparisons with Japanese hairs, and my thoughts. This will mainly be me nerding out over brush details, so there won't be as much focus on brush heads or movement in this video. Please also excuse the dirty bristles. White bristles don't show up well on camera. It's been a couple years since I introduced Shou Shou on my channel. Shou Shou and Chinese brushes have garnered lots of interest over the past couple years in the international Fude community. Chinese brands' main target audiences are people living in China, but it seems like they're finally branching out as they both have AliExpress stores now. Shou Shou opened their store in November of 2020 while Qin opened theirs a month after in December. For those of you concerned about the legitimacy of the shops, I asked the Shou Shou owner if the stores is theirs, and they confirmed that it is. I didn't confirm with Qin, but you can ask them if you're interested. I'll preface this by saying that I was disappointed by the inconsistent quality control with my last Shou Shou haul, which is why I didn't order again for the longest time. It's been like 4 years. Additionally, in the past, it was hard for me to show discontinued or sold out brushes since I felt bad that people couldn't buy them, which is why I didn't show some of my Chinese brushes, like the Qin saibikoho ones, but the ones in this video are still available at the time of making this video. I also bought some Qin Shakuda dupes years ago, but I wasn't a fan of them and sold them off immediately without thinking about making a video. The goat hairs were not soft enough for my sensitive skin at the time. That was like 3 or 4 years ago as well, so my skin is even more sensitive than it is now, and if you have extremely sensitive skin, I don't recommend that series. I also wasn't a fan of the grayscale one with the walnut handle. A little bit of background on Qin. They are a small company who generally has higher prices than Shou Shou and are younger than Shou Shou. I think Qin started as a brand around 2014 while Shou Shou started in 2012, but don't quote me on that. Shou Shou is one of, if not the largest Chinese brush brand, and I believe it is the original equipment manufacturer for many other brands. They also make a ton of synthetic brushes. There are a lot of smaller Chinese brush companies out there, and I've heard of many, but once I find something I like or love, I tend to stick with it and don't really go out of my comfort zone. When I do occasionally try some others out, I get somewhat disappointed. I decided to order some more Chinese brushes since I haven't been too pleased with the quality control of Japanese Fude recently, and a friend picked up some brushes from the Shou Shou Lunar line, or the green series, and is very happy with it. In general, I think Chinese, particularly Shou Shou brushes, are great quality and affordable, but they have 3 flaws: inconsistent hair batch quality, and bundling for eye brushes in the past, which they have now overcome, and ferrules that tarnish. Bundling variances are normal since these are handmade, but sometimes it's too drastically different, and that's where I draw the line. Some Chinese ferrules in silver and gold are also prone to tarnishing, while the Japanese counterparts hold up well for many years without tarnishing. It's a gamble with the Chinese ferrule quality since sometimes they'll tarnish while other times others won't. On the other hand, my old Shou Shou matte black ferrules have held up well over the years without tarnishing or discoloration. Here are some of the tarnished ferrules on the left. So all of these ones are tarnished. I also have a Louis Young brush with a tarnished ferrule, so that brand also uses low quality ferrules. Or they did in the past, I'm not sure about now. These gold, matte black, and silver ones have held up considerably well. The saibikoho in the past would really vary depending on the batch of hair, and I know even Fude brands have the same issue, but I wanted to bring it up. I think the brand has done a good job at stabilizing their hair batch inconsistency. The brushes I have compared to my friends and my backups are all pretty consistent, and while there can be some variance in softness, it's not a big enough difference for me to be dissatisfied with them. Shou Shou eyeshadow brushes weren't always bundled consistently in the past. Here are some of my older saibikoho eyeshadow brushes. The shapes varied for the exact same brush. Most of them were consistently bundled like these 4 that are all the same brush. The one I wasn't happy with was the one on the right. These are 2 of the same brush, but one is bundled way worse than the other. The bundling of the one on the right is pretty poor. You can see how uneven it is, especially on the left. It's not even with the hairs that are bundled more evenly on the right. If I turn it this way, it's like kind of missing a little bit of hair here too. And actually a Chikuhodo T5 that I bought recently as well had the same issue. I also wasn't a fan of how sparse the top of this brush was because it was missing some hair here. It's just like it got pretty thin at the top compared to the other one that I have, which is fuller. This is me being detail-oriented and nitpicky, but to be fair, Japanese Fude are not always consistently bundled either, like I mentioned earlier, and in my Chikuhodo Homare review. Now the eye brushes are much more consistent. I tried both my friend's Zuvmore eye brushes and mine, and they're bundled well and don't have a large variance in shape or density. The face brushes have always been pretty consistently bundled. As for hair quality, the green and Zuvmore eye brushes I have are also made out of saibikoho. They are very soft, yet still able to perform relatively well. I really enjoy them, but don't think they will last many years. The hairs are delicate, so when you use them in strong circular motions or sweep back and forth too much, they'll break. The good thing is that they're affordable, so you can replace them whenever you feel like they're getting scratchy or not performing as well as they used to. Japanese brushes also have this issue, and I find myself having to repurchase them once they become scratchy. What's interesting is that the tables have turned when it comes to bundling inconsistencies, and the Chinese brush companies like Shou Shou are more consistent now, while the Japanese ones are more inconsistent, mainly Chikuhodo, Hokodo, and Koyudo from what I've experienced. I think as Fude has become increasingly popular over the years, the Fude companies have had to make more and more of the brushes, but with the same number of people in their workforce, and haven't been able to adapt and scale the growth as well as Chinese brands have. So for example, if the company is used to making 20,000 brushes a year, but one year they end up with a demand of 100,000 brushes, it's difficult to be able to maintain the same quality and bundling as before. You may think, why not just hire more people? It's not easy to hire more Fude masters because it requires years of training, and the industry has a dwindling workforce. There used to be people who categorized hair types like saikoho, sokoho, ototsuho, and so forth, but that occupation has pretty much disappeared as the years passed, which is why most brands no longer write what type of goat hair the brushes are. More recently, I suspect the makie artists are also going in that same direction, which is why we've been seeing imperfect hand-painted makie. Koyudo Sakura makie hasn't been looking the best over the past couple of years. The leaves and flowers used to be crisp and clean, but now there's uneven painting and polishes on them that have a bunch of lines. Perhaps the Kumano Fude industry isn't ideal for younger generations who are looking for careers in tech and other areas of interest, which is why we're seeing so many quality control issues and inability to keep up with demand. There probably isn't a continual and constant influx of young and new people joining the industry. Anyway, back to Chinese brands. In general, a large Chinese company like Shou Shou seems to have worked out these issues, which I hope the Fude companies can also figure out eventually. Of course, it's impossible to have perfect, consistent bundling for 100% of brushes made as they're handmade, but I definitely think the Chinese brands have improved over the years. Hakuhodo is still consistent in both their bundling and hair quality for the most part. In my humble opinion, Hakuhodo is and has always been the most consistent Fude brand. This is merely my opinion, and you may think otherwise if you've purchased some recent Chinese or Hakuhodo brushes that weren't that well bundled. Now let's talk about the odor and hair shedding. The odor of the brushes are sometimes much stronger than Japanese brushes, but even Japanese squirrel brushes smell fairly pungent when you wash them for the first couple of times. I recommend washing goat brushes several times and letting it air out before using it if it really bothers you. Another con is hair shedding. I haven't had this issue that much with Chinese brushes in general, but once in a while I'll get a bad brush that will keep shedding hairs. I'm talking over 30 or 40. Of course, Japanese brushes also have bad ones like my Wayne Goss old tea-dyed 13 brush that won't stop shedding every single time I use it, so I don't like to use it. It's every once in a blue moon that I'll have bad shedding, but I just wanted to throw that out there. The hair shedding doesn't only pertain to Chinese brushes, but I wanted to mention it. I didn't put any in brush guards, and all the brushes kept shedding between the first 2 washes. All the goat brushes had a medium scent during wash and post-wash except for the Qin brush, which smelled very strong. The smell will dissipate after washing several times and letting it air out for a couple weeks. It's not bad for me, but if you're sensitive to smells, I recommend wearing a mask and opening the window during washing. A friend mentioned that her Shou Shou Green Series brushes smelled like barn. The Red Skull brushes didn't smell strongly during or after washing. Here I'll explain the hair type and quality, go into details of different types of Chinese saibikoho, and comparisons with Japanese goat hair. All the goat hairs here are made out of Chinese saibikoho, which according to a friend used to be extra fine baby goat hair, but is probably just a finer batch of saikoho now. These are from the Shou Shou Green line, Zuvmore's Black Onyx line, and Qingzhi Lean line or Phoenix line. Here I'll get into the nitty-gritty details of the Chinese characters. The Chinese characters the brands use for most saibikoho are Xinan Guangfeng, which literally translates to tender or delicate light peak / tip of edge. Xi means thin and soft, Nen means delicate, and together the words mean tender. Guang means light as in daylight or moonlight, not the weight measurement. Feng means peak or tip of edge with a mountain radical, so the peak of a mountain. Peak as the tips of the hair. I have put both simplified and traditional variants on the screen for those of you who are more familiar with traditional Chinese. Mainland China uses simplified, but Hong Kong and Taiwan still use traditional. Additionally, Japanese kanji is traditional. I will call this hair type shinen from here on out. There are actually two types of Chinese saibikoho. Shinen is what companies like Shou Shou and Qin have and produce the regular saibikoho lines with, and what I consider second-tier saibikoho. These hairs are easier to procure, and I use the word easier relative to hairs that are more difficult to procure since I think it's generally harder to obtain higher quality hairs nowadays. The hairs are thicker, more yellow, more elastic, and stronger than Japanese saibikoho. It feels denser and less airy as a result. Chinese shinen saibikoho now is basically equivalent to Japanese saikoho based off of the comparisons I made with my old saikoho Fude. Here is the Zouv More Black Onyx number 1 on the left and the Chikuhodo J531 on the right. My J531 is from like 2015 or 2016. If anything, the Zouv More hairs are finer and less wavy. This is the Zouv More number 3 on the left and the Chikuhodo J110 on the right. My Chikuhodo is also old. Hopefully you guys can see the details of the hair close up. It is also comparable to old Takeda EXS hair, which is somewhere in between Japanese saikoho and saibikoho, although EXS hair is a tad softer than this hair type. The one on the left is the LL03 and the one on the right is an old EXS brush. There's a minimal difference, but I also think old EXS hair is more resilient, elastic, and glossy. I don't think this specific batch of hair is available anymore, and the batches are pretty inconsistent, as the last few EXS brushes I got after this one a couple years ago, like this round one that I'll insert a photo of here, wasn't the same softness or quality. These shinen hairs are dissimilar to old Koyudo saibikoho. The Koyudo hairs are fine and tender, but they lack the elasticity and strength that the Chinese hairs have, since this tier of saibikoho is closer to Japanese saikoho. Old Koyudo saibikoho is wonderfully soft, and the Koyudo CDJapan Yakisugi blush brush is awesome, but it's on the airy side from what I remember, and I prefer blush brushes to be on the denser side. I also used to have a Koyudo saibikoho eye brush that was dense but felt flat and too soft for anything but loose and super soft pressed products. Tanseido saikoho is similar in touch, glossiness, elasticity, fineness, and softness, but I think Tanseido's is a little finer and softer, however Tanseido's is more yellow. This brush is freshly washed, which shows you the true yellowness of the hairs. Shou Shou bleached their hairs to be wider than Tanseido's. I'll compare it right here. I'm pretty sure you can see the difference in color here. Here's the LL03 on the left and the Tanseido YWC14 on the right. These hairs are finer and softer than the Chikuhodo Takumi series and most of Koyudo's undyed saikoho hairs. The top tier hair is called Shiwei Guangfeng, which literally translates to fine or subtle light point of spear. For those of you who don't have any background in Chinese, the first and third characters are the same as the second tier saibikoho, but the second and last characters are different. The second character Wei means front and Shiwei together means fine. The last character Feng means point of spear with a gold radical and is related to metal tools. It's finer, wider, and softer than the second tier shinen hair type. Here it is compared with the Shou Shou LL01 on the left and my Shiwei on the right. Keep in mind the one on the left has been used while the one on the right hasn't really been used, but the one on the right is a lot wider than the one on the left, even after washing. According to Shou Shou, it's softer than squirrel hair. I personally think that red squirrel is softer. This is the closest hair type to Koyudo's old saibikoho. This type of hair is extremely rare, scarce, and difficult for companies to procure since companies don't typically sell it to the general public. It's the top-tier original Chinese undyed goat hair type and is the most expensive. The softness ranking is Shiwei, Qin's Fenglin line, and Zuvmore's Black Onyx line are about equal. Sometimes Qin's is softer than Zuvmore's depending on the hair batch, followed by the Shou Shou long green line. The difference between Zuvmore's saibikoho and Shou Shou long's green saibikoho is minimal. Please note that there are other Chinese brush companies and what they label as saibikoho can be very different in quality compared to Shou Shou long and Qin. If you want stronger hairs that can pick up more and blend better, then I recommend buying Chinese saikoho instead. It is basically the equivalent to Japanese sokoho now, and the hairs aren't as delicate. Ultimately, I think that Japanese brands are able to process or treat their gray squirrel hairs a little bit better than Chinese brands are currently doing, while Chinese brands like Shou Shou long and Qin have higher quality, high-grade goat hair at this time. The shocking thing is that both Chinese brands have more higher quality goat hair now compared to when I first started buying them a couple years ago. Back then, they had saibikoho lines, but not as much, and they would sell out very quickly, so there was less of it. Now they have undyed saikoho in their green, Zuvmore, and Fenglin lines that are part of their regular lines and get restocked. Back to gray squirrel hair. Shou Shou long's gray squirrel used to be silkier and almost on par with Japanese brands, but it seems like they haven't been able to procure as high quality of hair as they used to. Don't get me wrong, their gray squirrel hairs are still exquisitely soft, but I'm just saying compared to my older gray squirrel brushes from them, the recent ones are just a tiny bit less soft. It's minimal difference in softness and they still work just as well. My Zuvmore Z03 angled gray squirrel powder brush on the right has softer hairs than my Chikuhodo MK-1, MK-2, and Beautylish Ox brush, but my Z4 has softer hairs than the rest. Here it is compared with the Ox brush from Beautylish. The Beautylish Ox brush is on the left. Here it is with the MK-1 on the left. Here it is compared with the MK-2. MK-2's on the left. Here's the Z4 on the left. I finally washed my MKs and now they're all fluffed up. So MK1 is on the left, MK2 is on the right. My MK1 is denser than my MK2. You can see the beautiful hand-painted maquille. A friend I gifted the round gray squirrel Zuvmore Z08 brush says she thinks it's the softest gray squirrel she owns, and another friend loves it for blush. I've only tried one of Qin's gray squirrel brushes recently, and the hairs are soft but wavy and feel coarser than Shou Shou long's. I'll link the video in the upper right hand corner so you can see it. For red squirrel, Chinese brands have more of it, and the largest difference is in the hair color. The Chinese brands have hairs that are redder compared to the Japanese brands. The softness is about the same. Here you can see that the hairs of the Chikuhodo KZ5 on the left are darker and more brown compared to the Zuvmore hairs of the ones in the middle and the right. Here's the KZ5 and the Z05. The KZ5 on the left with the Z07 on the right. My old Shou Shou long red squirrel hairs are silkier and don't have any prickliness compared to the Z05 I bought more recently. So my old one is on the left, and the newer one, this is the Z07 on the right. Here it is compared with the Z05 on the right. I I can feel the hair tips on the Z05, but not with the round Z07, so it varies too. This may all change in the future as Chinese brands continually improve themselves. Don't hesitate to try scroll brushes from Shou Shou. I am obsessed with the Z07 at the moment and think most people would love Shou Shou scroll brushes. Check out my Chikuhodo Homade review for red scroll hair comparisons as well. Here's my old Shou Shou gray scroll blush brush on the left compared to the Z03 on the right. The one on the left has glossier hairs. The hairs are glossier, but that could just mean that they put more conditioner on it. I'm not exactly sure. It's just, it feels softer and glossier and silkier. Lastly, in regards to the hair types, the Chinese brands have a lot more exotic hairs now compared to the past. I don't recall them having red, silver, or black fox before. All of these brushes are very soft and best paired with loose and soft pressed powders for sheer, natural, airy, and light makeup finishes. I think people who like those types of finishes or people with dry and mature skin would thoroughly enjoy these brushes. I'd like to emphasize that softness is not everything, but it is important to those with sensitive skin. It's hard to use a brush that hurts your face. On the opposite end, if the brushes are too soft, they won't be able to pick up or apply much pigment, and you have to gradually build up the pigment. It's definitely more efficient and versatile to use thicker, textured hairs like Chikuhodo, dyed goat, or horse if you want something that'll be able to grab a variety of pressed products easily. Overall, I'm overjoyed that the brands have continually improved themselves, especially Shou Shou, and will continue to buy from them. I hope this was helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you found this informative. Thank you so much for watching and see you in my next video. Bye bye. ご視聴どうもありがとうございました。My voice is going out. I'm having a hard time holding all four of them. Okay, so can you please stay flat, all four of you? Yes. Yes. Or maybe not. Please. It's crooked. It's crooked, but I'm not gonna fix it anymore. Like, okay, done. 完了。完了。完成したと思う。